I won the $384 million lottery jackpot and told no one. I called my family, pretending I was about to be evicted. My mother hung up on me and my brother called me a loser, so I set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in my small apartment was heavier than usual. It was the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, but empty, amplifying the frantic thumping of my own heart. For 3 days, the winning lottery ticket had sat on my kitchen table, a simple slip of paper that felt heavier than a gold bar. $384 million, the biggest jackpot in state history, and it was mine. I should have been celebrating, dancing, screaming with joy. Instead, I felt a paralyzing sense of isolation, a cold dread that coiled in my stomach. The money didn't feel real, but the loneliness it cast into sharp relief certainly did. For my entire life, I had been Clara, the reliable one. Clara, the quiet librarian who never made waves, never asked for much, and was always there to pick up the pieces. I was the one who had put my own academic ambitions on hold to care for our father in his final years, while my mother, Margaret, was too busy with her social clubs, and my older brother, Richard, was too focused on climbing the real estate ladder. I was the one who remembered birthdays, sent thoughtful gifts I couldn't really afford, and listened patiently to their endless complaints and boasts. I was a fixture in their lives, as dependable and as overlooked as a sturdy piece of furniture. Now, with a fortune that could change the world, I found myself wondering who in my world actually cared about me. Not the dependable daughter or the dowdy sister, but Clara. The woman who loved classic literature, dreamed of visiting the ancient libraries of Europe, and felt a quiet pang of sadness every time her family dismissed her life's passion as a cute little hobby. That's when the idea began to form. It started as a whisper of morbid curiosity and quickly grew into a desperate need to know the truth. Before I claimed the ticket, before I hired lawyers and financial advisors, before my life was irrevocably changed, I had to conduct one final, painful experiment. I had to know where I stood. I needed to see past the polite facades and obligatory holiday gatherings. I needed to know who would catch me if I fell. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone. My story was simple, plausible, and humiliating. I would tell them I had fallen behind on rent after my hours were cut at the library. I was facing eviction. I just needed a few $100s to tide me over, a small loan to keep a roof over my head. It was a lie, of course, but the desperation I would need to fake felt terrifyingly close to the surface. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over my mother's contact photo. This test would either confirm my deepest fears or give me the one thing all the money in the world couldn't buy: the knowledge that I was truly loved. The betrayal, I would soon learn, was worse than the loneliness itself. My first call was to my mother, Margaret. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice clipped and impatient. "Clara, I'm in the middle of a garden club meeting. What is it?" There was no warmth, no gentle inquiry, just the immediate implication that I was an interruption. I took a shaky breath, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Mom, I'm so sorry to bother you, I'm in some trouble." Trouble, the word was laced with annoyance, not concern. "What kind of trouble? Don't tell me your car broke down again. I told you that vehicle was a rust bucket." "No, it's not the car," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. I could picture her perfectly, standing on the pristine patio of one of her friends' homes, a glass of iced tea in one hand, gesturing impatiently with the other. "It's my apartment. They cut my hours at the library and I've fallen behind on rent. Mom, they're threatening to evict me. I just need a little help, just until I can get back on my feet." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the faint sound of women laughing in the background, the clinking of glasses. My mother was surrounded by her friends, projecting an image of a perfect, successful life, and her daughter's plea for help was an unwelcome stain on that image. Finally, she sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of pure frustration. Clara, honestly, you're 38 years old. When are you going to learn to manage your finances? A librarian's salary isn't much, I know, but surely you can budget. This is exactly what your father and I always worried about. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and shameful. I know I'm so sorry. It's just a temporary setback. I just need $500. I'll pay you back with interest, I swear. $500? She scoffed, the sound like gravel in my ear. It's not about the money, Clara, it's the principle of the matter. If I bail you out now, you'll never learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to figure this out for yourself. It builds character. Before I could even respond, before I could plead or argue or even just say goodbye, the line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stared at my phone, the screen dark. She didn't ask if I had food. She didn't ask where I would go. She just disconnected. The pain was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Shaking, I dialed my brother, Richard. He answered on the first ring, his voice booming with the false confidence of a salesman who had just closed a big deal. Clara, to what do I owe the pleasure? I'm just about to show a 7-figure property in the Heights, so make it quick. I repeated my story, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I tried to convey the same sense of panic, the same shame. Richard listened without interruption, but it wasn't a patient silence. It was the silence of someone waiting for their turn to speak, to pass judgment. When I finished, he let out a short, humorless laugh. Wow, Clara, just wow. Facing eviction? I can't say I'm surprised. I've been telling you for years that library job was a dead end. You should have gotten your real estate license like I did. But you had to be noble and stick with your books. Richard, please, I begged, my voice cracking. I'm not asking for a lecture. I'm asking for a loan. A loan? He echoed, his voice dripping with condescension. You think this is about money? This is about your life choices. You're a loser, Clara. A sweet one maybe, but a loser nonetheless. I can't just throw my hard-earned money at your problems. It would be enabling you. You need to hit rock bottom. Maybe then you'll finally wake up. The cruelty was so casual, so effortless. He delivered the words as if he were giving me sound financial advice. I'm not a loser, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Look, I've got to go. My clients are here. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, little sister. It's the only way. He hung up. I sank onto my couch, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. The winning lottery ticket on the table seemed to mock me. All the money in the world, and I had never felt more worthless. The silence of the apartment pressed in on me again, but this time it was different. It was filled with a cold, clear certainty. My mother and my brother saw me as a burden, a failure. They didn't love me, they tolerated me. A quiet fury began to smolder beneath the hurt. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me all figured out, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. The roots of their dismissal ran deep, tangled in years of unspoken resentments and carefully constructed family narratives. I was cast as the sensitive, unambitious one long before I ever shelved my first library book. It was a role assigned to me by my mother, Margaret, a woman whose entire identity was built on the shaky foundation of appearances. For her, success wasn't about happiness or fulfillment. It was about having the right address, the right car, and children who provided her with bragging rights. Richard, 4 years my senior, had always been her star exhibit. From a young age, he was groomed for a world of profit margins and power lunches. He was naturally charming, ruthlessly competitive, and mirrored our mother's materialistic values perfectly. He became a successful real estate agent, and his face, plastered on "for sale" signs across the city, was a constant source of pride for her. Richard just closed on a mansion in the hills. She would announce at family gatherings, her voice swelling with satisfaction as if she had personally brokered the deal. My path was quieter. I loved books, the calm sanctity of libraries, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. When I announced my intention to get a master's in library science, my mother's smile was thin and strained. "Well, that's nice, dear," she'd said, "as long as it makes you happy." But her tone implied the opposite. How could a dusty, low-paying job possibly make anyone happy? The true schism, however, occurred during the last 2 years of my father's life. He was a kind, gentle man who had always encouraged my love of reading. When he fell ill, his needs became all-consuming. Margaret, who found the realities of illness unseemly and inconvenient, hired a series of caregivers who never seemed to last. "They're just not the right fit," she would say, unwilling to admit that she couldn't tolerate the disruption to her social calendar. Richard was, as always, swamped with work. He'd visit for 20 minutes on a Sunday, fill the room with his loud, booming energy, clap our father on the back, and then race off to his next appointment, leaving the heavy silence of responsibility in his wake. So the burden fell to me. I reduced my hours at the library to part-time, effectively killing any chance of promotion. I moved my father into my small apartment when he could no longer manage the stairs at home. I learned to administer his medication, manage his doctor's appointments, and sit with him through long, painful nights. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work, but I did it out of love. During that time, my mother and brother treated my sacrifice as an expectation. I was the unmarried daughter with the flexible job. Of course, I would be the one to do it. They sent money, of course, conscience payments that allowed them to feel helpful without actually being present. After Dad passed away, they patted me on the back and said, "You were so good with him, Clara." Then, they moved on. His house was sold within a month, the profits split between them as Richard handled the deal. I was offered a token amount, which I refused. They didn't protest. My life went back to what it was, only now I was saddled with debt from the time I'd taken off work and an emotional void that ached constantly. They never once acknowledged what I had given up. In their eyes, I hadn't made a sacrifice. I had simply fulfilled my designated role as the family caretaker. They had forgotten that I had dreams too, dreams I had quietly packed away, like old books in a dusty attic. Now, sitting in the silence of my apartment, that forgotten part of myself was stirring, fueled by a righteous anger they could never have anticipated. They saw a doormat. They were about to learn that doormats can be pulled out from under people's feet. For a full day, I wallowed. I let the grief and anger wash over me, replaying their cruel words until they were etched into my memory. But on the second day, something shifted. The passive sorrow began to curdle into active resolve. I was not the victim in this story. I was the narrator, and I held the pen. The test was over, the results were in, and it was time to write the next chapter. My first call wasn't to a therapist or a friend, but to a man named Arthur Vance. He was the senior partner at the most prestigious law firm in the state, a name I'd found after hours of online research. He specialized in wealth management and trusts for high-net-worth individuals. When I called his office and explained, in the vaguest possible terms, that I was about to come into a significant, life-altering inheritance and needed absolute discretion, I was put through to him immediately. Sitting in his opulent, wood-paneled office the next day felt like stepping into another world. Arthur was in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a mind as sharp as a razor. He listened without judgment as I explained the situation, omitting the family test but making my intentions clear. "I want to set up my entire financial future before a single soul knows my name," I stated, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need an ironclad structure. Trusts, foundations, everything." He nodded slowly. "Anonymity can be the greatest luxury of all. We can create a blind trust to claim the prize. Your name need never appear on a public document." This was the key. This was my leverage, the clever trap that was beginning to form in my mind. My family's world revolved around public perception and status. My wealth would be a ghost, a powerful force they couldn't see but would most certainly feel the effects of. Over the next few days, Arthur and his team worked with breathtaking efficiency. We established the blind trust. We hired a renowned financial advisory firm. We discussed tax implications and philanthropic strategies. I felt a surge of empowerment I hadn't experienced in my entire life. I wasn't just a librarian anymore, I was the architect of a new reality. My investigation wasn't about digging up dirt on my family. It was about building a fortress around myself and the one person who deserved to be inside it. Which brought me to my final call. My hands were steady this time as I dialed my younger sister, Emily. She was the family's afterthought, the oops baby born more than a decade after me. She was a 24-year-old student teacher, perpetually broke but overflowing with a kindness that my mother and Richard found baffling. They dismissed her as naive. I knew it was her strength. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and warm. "Clara, hey, I was just thinking about you." My carefully constructed composure almost broke. "Hey, Em, is this a bad time?" "Never for you," she said instantly. "What's up? You sound kind of weird." I launched into the same story I'd told the others, but this time, the shame felt real because I hated lying to her. I told her about the reduced hours, the rent, the eviction notice. I made my voice tremble, and I didn't have to fake the tears that welled in my eyes. There was no sigh of annoyance from Emily, no lecture, just a sharp intake of breath and 3 simple words. "Oh, Clara, where are you?" "I'm at home," I whispered, "but I don't know for how much longer." "Don't you move," she said, her voice firm, protective. "Don't you go anywhere, I'm coming. I'll be there as soon as I can." "Emily, no, you don't have to do that," I protested weakly. "It's a 4-hour drive, and I know you're busy with school." "Stop, just stop," she said, and I could hear her moving around, the sound of keys jingling. "Family is more important than a lesson plan. I have some money saved up. Not a lot, but it's yours. I'll be there before midnight, just hang on." Before I could say another word, she hung up. But this time, the silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with a profound, soul-shattering love. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, looking at the winning ticket. The numbers on it were just ink on paper. The true jackpot was driving 200 miles through the night with her last few dollars to save a sister who didn't need saving. She was the one. She was the only one, and I was about to change her life forever. The hours I waited for Emily were the longest of my life. I paced my small apartment, a bundle of nerves and anticipation. The plan I had set in motion with Arthur Vance felt abstract, a series of legal maneuvers and financial projections. But this, Emily's imminent arrival, was real. This was the heart of it all. This was the first true confrontation, not with anger, but with overwhelming love and generosity. Just before 11 o'clock, a pair of headlights swept across my living room window. I flew to the door, pulling it open before she had even killed the engine of her sputtering, ancient car. Emily practically fell out, her face pale with exhaustion, her eyes wide with worry. She was clutching a worn envelope in her hand. "Clara," she breathed, rushing forward and wrapping me in a fierce hug. I buried my face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of her cheap shampoo and the faint smell of classroom chalk. I held on tight, trying to absorb her warmth, her goodness. "You're here," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Of course I'm here," she said, pulling back to look at me, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay? You look terrible." I probably did. I hadn't slept properly in days. I led her inside, and she immediately pushed the crumpled envelope into my hands. "It's not much," she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "It's $500. It was supposed to be for my car insurance and textbooks, but that can wait. This is more important." I looked down at the envelope. Her name and address were written on the back in her neat, loopy handwriting. Inside was every last dollar she had to her name, given without a moment's hesitation. This small, worn envelope was more valuable to me than the certified check for $384 million that was waiting in my lawyer's safe. That was when I broke. The tears I'd been holding back finally came, not tears of sadness, but of a wrenching, profound gratitude. I sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "Whoa, hey, it's okay," Emily said, sitting beside me and rubbing my back. "We'll figure this out. You can stay with me. My apartment is tiny, but we'll make it work. We'll go to the landlord tomorrow and—" "No," I choked out, looking up at her through my tears. "Emily, that's not it. I have to tell you something." I took a deep breath and began. I told her everything. I started with the lottery ticket, the shock, the disbelief. I watched her expression shift from worried confusion to wide-eyed astonishment. Her jaw literally dropped. You what?" she stammered. "I won," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The big one, the whole thing." She just stared at me, shaking her head slowly. "No, no way, you're kidding. This is a joke, right? A really weird, cruel joke." I reached over to the coffee table and picked up a pristine, sealed envelope from Arthur Vance's law firm. This is a copy of the official letter from the State Lottery Commission, confirming the win through the blind trust my lawyer set up. The original is in a vault. Her hands trembled as she took it from me. She carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. I watched as her eyes scanned the document, her lips moving silently as she read the staggering numbers. She read it once, then a second time. A strangled sound escaped her throat. $384 million, she whispered, the words barely audible. She looked from the paper to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Clara, is this real?" I nodded, a watery smile on my face. "It's real." Then I told her about the other part. The test. The phone calls to our mother and brother. I repeated their words, the casual cruelty of Margaret, the sneering condescension of Richard. As I spoke, her look of awe was replaced by a familiar, weary sadness. "She wasn't." T surprised. That in itself was the most damning indictment of all. "Oh, Clara," she said softly, reaching out and taking my hand. "I'm so sorry they did that to you, but I'm not surprised." "Neither was I admitted, but I had to know for sure." I looked at the envelope of money still in my other hand. "You were the only one who showed up." She finally let out a shaky laugh, tears now streaming down her face. "So I drove 200 miles with my last $500 to rescue my multimillionaire sister from eviction." The absurdity of it hit us both at the same time, and we started to laugh. It was a hysterical, cleansing laughter that filled the small apartment, chasing away the shadows of the last few days. It was the sound of two sisters, finally on the same side, bound not by obligation, but by genuine love. The first confrontation was over, and the only thing that had been revealed was the pure gold of my sister's heart. With Emily by my side, the world suddenly snapped into focus. The oppressive weight of my secret was lifted, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and a giddy, bubbling excitement. We spent the next 2 days hidden away in my apartment, which now felt less like a cage and more like a command center. We ordered pizza, drank cheap wine from coffee mugs, and planned our next move. Or rather, my next move. Emily's only role was to be my sister, my anchor, and the sole beneficiary of the Emily Future Fund, as we'd started calling it. The first order of business was to formalize her security. I called Arthur Vance and instructed him to immediately purchase a charming little house in a quiet, leafy neighborhood near her teaching school. He was to pay off her entire student loan debt, which was staggering, and set up an ironclad trust fund in her name that would generate a comfortable income for the rest of her life. She would never have to worry about money for car insurance or textbooks again. She protested, of course, saying it was too much, but I was firm. "This isn't a gift, Em," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "This is a return on investment. You invested $500 of kindness in me, and the dividends are just starting to pay out." With Emily's future secured, I turned my attention to the final act. The case I was building against my mother and brother wasn't legal. It was moral. I needed to orchestrate a scenario where their own behavior would be the star witness and their greed the irrefutable proof of their character. The plan was simple: a family dinner. I sent out a group text message. "Hi everyone. I have some major life news to share, and I'd like to do it in person. Could you all come to my apartment for dinner this Saturday night?" The replies came quickly. Richard's was dripping with suspicion. "What kind of news? Did you get fired?" My mother's was more direct. "Clara, if this is about asking for money again, the answer is still no. I will not have you making a scene." I kept my reply calm and neutral. "It's nothing like that. It's important personal news. Please just be here, 7 o'clock. Their curiosity, I knew, would be too strong to resist. They would come, armed with lectures and condescending advice, ready to witness the next chapter of my supposed failure. The stakes felt incredibly high. This wasn't just about exposing them, it was about severing a tie that had been slowly poisoning me for years. It was about choosing a new family, one built on loyalty and love, with Emily as its founding member. In preparation, Emily and I did something that felt both childish and deeply necessary. We role-played. Emily, a gifted mimic, played the parts of Margaret and Richard with unnerving accuracy. "Honestly, Clara, this wallpaper is so dreary," she'd say, channeling our mother's pinched expression. "And are these plates from a discount store? You have to project an image of success, even when you're failing." Then she'd puff out her chest and become Richard. "Look, I've got a 9 o'clock tea time at the club tomorrow, so let's get this sob story over with. What is it now? Did the rust bucket finally die for good?" We laughed until we cried, but beneath the humor was a steely resolve. Their predictability was their greatest weakness. They would walk into my apartment expecting the same old Clara, the quiet pushover. They had no idea they were walking into a theater where the stage was set, the lights were about to go up, and the final act of their relationship with me was about to begin. The irrefutable proof of their character was not something I had to find. It was something they were about to deliver themselves on a silver platter. I just had to be patient enough to let them. Saturday night arrived with a tense, electric stillness. Emily had helped me prepare a simple but elegant meal, a roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, the kind of comforting food our father used to love. It felt appropriate. Emily was my co-conspirator, sitting quietly in the kitchen, offering silent, supportive smiles as I waited. She had insisted on being there, not to gloat, but to bear witness. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock. My mother never liked to be early or late. It was all part of her obsession with control and appearances. I took one last, deep breath and opened the door. There they were, Margaret and Richard, standing on my welcome mat like a pair of inspectors. My mother's eyes did a quick, critical sweep of my living room. Richard was already looking at his watch. "Clara," my mother said, stepping inside and handing me a bottle of cheap wine, a hostess gift that was more of an insult than a kindness. "I hope this major news is worth rearranging my Saturday for." "Let me guess," Richard chimed in, striding past me and plopping onto my couch as if he owned it. "You're moving into a smaller, cheaper apartment. Finally taking my advice, I see." I just smiled, a calm, serene expression that seemed to unsettle them. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Richard. Thank you for coming. Dinner is almost ready." We sat at my small dining table, the air thick with unspoken tension. They picked at their food, making thinly veiled criticisms. "This chicken is a little dry, dear," my mother commented. "You should have basted it more." "You know, Clara, I just sold a place with a gourmet kitchen. Sub-zero fridge, wolf range, you wouldn't even know what to do with it," Richard added with a smirk. I let them talk. I let them lecture me about my career, my finances, my life choices. I refilled their wine glasses and listened patiently, my composure a stone wall against which their condescension crashed and broke. Emily sat opposite me, her gaze steady, her presence a silent source of strength. Finally, when the plates were cleared and they were leaning back in their chairs, smug and self-satisfied, I knew it was time. I folded my hands on the table and looked at them. "I do have some news," I began, my voice clear and even. "But first, I want to thank you for the other day." They exchanged a confused look. "The other day?" my mother asked. "Yes, when I called you both for help," I clarified. "It was an incredibly illuminating experience." Richard rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go. We're not giving you money, Clara. End of story." "I know," I said. "You made that very clear. Mom, you told me I needed to figure it out, and that bailing me out would prevent me from learning to stand on my own 2 feet. Then you hung up on me." My mother's face tightened. "I was teaching you a lesson about responsibility." "And you, Richard," I continued, turning to him. "You laughed. You told me I was a loser who needed to hit rock bottom. You told me to pull myself up by my bootstraps. It was tough love, he said defensively, shifting in his seat. Something you obviously need. I see, I said, pausing for a beat. And Emily, when I called her, drove 4 hours through the night with her last $500, ready to let me move in with her because she thought her sister was in trouble. I looked at Emily, whose eyes were shining. Then I turned my gaze back to the two stunned faces across the table. You see, the whole thing, the eviction, the desperation, it was a test. A lie. I wanted to see who actually cared about me versus who just saw me as a disappointment or a burden. A test, my mother spluttered, her face turning a blotchy red. How dare you? That's manipulative and childish. Is it? I asked softly. Or is it childish to hang up on your daughter when she's crying for help? Is it manipulative to call your sister a loser when she's at her lowest point? I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. The reason I don't need your money, I said, leaning forward slightly, is because a couple of weeks ago I bought a lottery ticket, and I won. Richard let out a short, barking laugh. Oh, sure you did. What was it, $5? Enough for a less dry chicken. I held his gaze. $384 million, I said calmly, the largest jackpot in the history of the state. The transformation was instantaneous and grotesque. Their jaws fell slack. The color drained from their faces, replaced by a ghastly pallor. They stared at me as if I had just sprouted a second head. You're lying, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. My lawyer, Arthur Vance, and my financial team have already set up the blind trust to claim the prize, I stated, the facts a series of solid, unshakable stones. It's all been verified. Richard was the first to recover, a sick, greedy smile spreading across his face. Clara, little sister, that's incredible. I knew you had it in you. We're rich. The "we" hit me like a physical slap. No, Richard, I said, my voice turning to ice. We are not rich, I am rich. And Emily, I said, reaching across the table to take my sister's hand, is Ken care of for the rest of her life. Her student loans are paid. Her new house closes next week. Her future is secure. What about us? My mother choked out, her eyes wide with panic and naked avarice. I'm your mother. My mother hung up on me, I replied, my voice devoid of all emotion. My brother called me a loser. You both failed the test. Your share of my good fortune was $500 and a bit of compassion. You couldn't manage it. This dinner was just a formality. It was your last chance to be a part of my life, and you spent it insulting me. I stood up from the table. Emily stood with me. The door is right where you left it, I said. Please see yourselves out. They just sat there, frozen, their faces a tragic mask of shock and regret. The moment of their realization was not triumphant for me, just deeply, profoundly sad. They hadn't lost hundreds of millions of dollars. They had lost a daughter and a sister, and they were only just beginning to understand the price. The aftermath was exactly as pathetic and predictable as I had imagined. For the first few days, there was silence. I pictured them in their respective homes, cycling through disbelief, rage, and a dawning, horrified sense of the magnitude of their miscalculation. Then, the floodgates opened. It started with a text from Richard. That was a cruel joke, Clara. Call me. We need to talk about this as a family. When I didn't reply, the texts became more frequent, more frantic. They were followed by voicemails, each one a masterclass in emotional whiplash. The first was angry. Who do you think you are, after everything we've done for you? The next was pleading. Clara, please, I was just trying to motivate you. You know how I am. We can invest this money together. I can triple it for you. The last one I listened to was just him, sobbing, begging me to call him back. My mother's attempts were more theatrical. She left long, rambling voicemails about her health, hinting at mysterious ailments brought on by stress. She talked about my father, how he would have wanted us to be united. She even showed up at the library one afternoon, causing a scene at the main desk until my boss had to politely ask her to leave. She never apologized. She never once said, "I'm sorry for how I treated you." She only talked about the money and what I owed her as a daughter. I never responded. I changed my phone number and, with Arthur's help, my legal name. The old Clara, the quiet librarian they thought they knew, ceased to exist. In her place was a woman who was finally living for herself. My new life began with Emily. We took that trip to Europe I had always dreamed of. We wandered through the Bodleian Library at Oxford and stood in the hushed grandeur of Trinity College Library in Dublin. I watched Emily's eyes light up with wonder, and I felt a sense of peace that no amount of money could truly buy. With my encouragement and funding, she finished her degree and started a non-profit organization that provided books and tutoring services to underprivileged school districts. She had found her calling, unburdened by the financial anxieties that had always held her back. I established a foundation in my father's name, dedicated to supporting literacy programs and palliative care facilities. The work gave me a sense of purpose that was more fulfilling than any job I'd ever had. I bought a modest, comfortable home on a few acres of land out in the country, with a library that took up an entire wing. It was my sanctuary. From time to time, news of my mother and brother would filter through to me. A distant cousin mentioned that Richard's real estate business had taken a downturn. He had over-leveraged himself, always chasing the next big thing, and without the safety net he assumed I would provide, his house of cards had crumbled. He had to sell his fancy car and the seven-figure property he was once so proud of. My mother's social standing plummeted. The story of her disowned, billionaire daughter became a piece of whispered gossip in her garden clubs and at her charity luncheons. The image she had so carefully curated was shattered beyond repair. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a quiet, resolute sense of justice. Their ruin wasn't my creation, it was their own. They had built their lives on a foundation of greed and arrogance, and it simply couldn't hold. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a year after the dinner, Emily and I were sitting on my porch, watching the leaves fall. She turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever miss them?" she asked softly. I considered the question for a long moment. I didn't miss the judgment, the condescension, or the feeling of being perpetually less than, but I mourned the family I wished we could have been. "I miss the idea of them," I finally said, "but the people they are? No, I don't miss them at all." A gentle breeze rustled the trees, and a sense of profound calm settled over I had lost a mother and a brother, but I had gained a sister, a purpose, and most importantly, myself. The winning ticket had given me a fortune, but the test had given me freedom. And that was a prize beyond all measure.